fellow travelers, and welcome to The Way of the Showman, where we view the world through the lens of showmanship. I am Captain Frodo, and I will be your host and your guide along the way. And we are on the way to self-creation, we're actually going to talk about learning as self-directed, or play is a kind of self-directed learning. And in that learning, what are we learning about? We're learning about the world, and we're learning about ourselves. And if we just keep our mind on that play as a way of being in a world, as a particular mode of human interaction with the world, or a way of being, then I believe we can find a very powerful way to imagine ourselves and self-create ourselves as artists. But we're starting, as always, with a quick just summary. And so last episode we spoke about learning, which is where we're going to pick it up today. But we spoke about learning as a way. By looking at learning, we are in a way looking at an aspect of the play instinct. We're looking at Homo ludens, as Heutzinger calls it, the playing human being. If we think that the human being is that the fact that we play is actually part of what makes us human, then we're going, well, what are the parameters and what are the specific things we're looking for? Well, one of them is learning, and we're going to develop that again today. And we looked about imagination, one of the most powerful and amazing things, and play, combining things in new ways, seeing the world in ways that it isn't just in that moment, as in ways that the world can be, goes at least as far back as 32,000 years ago, when they found that archaeologists found in a cave like a carving of a figurine, or a little small sculpture that is half human and with a lion head. So that whatever that thing was, it was not something that they saw cruising around. This was something else. And I believe we are not dealing with fancy in this stage. Not that you just, that'd be funny, just do that. I believe that they did that because they saw something deeper in it, something imaginative. And then last episode we spoke about playfulness, which we don't have to go too deep into that. You can listen to that again, because that is what everything is about. But I kind of had to bring it out since this is our particular topic this season. And then I connected together a whole lot of strands and things, pulling this from the list of Ashley Montague from his book Growing Young, where he has 27 different things, which we spoke about a couple of episodes ago. 27 different behavioral needs that any child or human being needs to have fulfilled to become a rich and well-fitted human being into their environment. And I kind of connected together a bunch of things and talked about it as sociality. And this is because, of course, this is not to try to get the scope of everything. That's not our purpose of this exploration along the way. So I am connecting this now, the sociality, into connection between human beings, which of course we know from Nalle's book, The Clown Manifesto. Play and connection have been two words that we've sort of been exploring, and that I believe lies at the heart of showmanship, of what it is that we do. We walk out onto stage, we try to connect with the people, and how do we do it? We do it playfully. And that then has to do, like, what are the roots of sociality? And we look then at Tomasello and his work on ultra-sociality, and the potential that we actually became ultra-social when there was almost none of us left, and we had to cooperate more through a cataclysm. We spoke about a big volcanic event. And then we sort of boiled it down, not by myself, which we've been boiling it down to play, and then sort of expanded it into play and connect with Nalle's things. And then now we are looking at Rutger Bregman from, not Breadman, but Bregman, looking at his work from a wonderful book called Humankind, A Hopeful History. And he, through much thought many things that we're not going to talk about just now, but we just boil it down to learning, bonding, and playing. And he says we're born here to learn and to bond and to play. And that to me is just one more, what do you call it, justification, one more person who arrives at the same thing. Because as we learn today, we will see that learning and play are quite deeply connected, and thus we are back at play and connect from Professor Nalle at the Stockholm School of where he teaches clowning. Well, he did anyway. So, without further ado, let's jump right back into the world of ideas and get cracking. So, we've spent a long time now, the last 2 episodes, second one quite a long one, maybe today will also be a little long, but we've spent a long time looking at the play instinct from a sort of particular point of view, which was summed up in the end of the last chapter with Bregman's words, we're born to learn, to bond and to play, learning, bonding and playing. And now we're going to shift this point of view slightly, because it's been a little abstract looking at how does play manifest in the world. I mean, that's a terrible title. It's not very good as kind of clickbait. It's like, you won't believe, that's the kind of stuff you need to write. You won't believe what you're gonna... Anyway, I'm not even going there. So we're going to shift the point of view now, not to make it more accessible for everyone, but after looking at like how can we actually see this play instinct or the play as a real powerful human drive in the world. Now we're stepping into closer alignment with a thinker and writer called Peter Gray, whom we have already mentioned a couple of times, I think. But we talked about him. It doesn't matter. The title of his book, Free to Learn, Why Unleashing the Instinct to Play Will Make Our Children Happier, More Self-Reliant, and Better Students for Life. Well, this title, Unleashing the Instinct to Play While Making Our Children Happier, More Self-Reliant, and Better Students for Life, that shows that Peter Gray is all for play, but that he makes the case for play being part of a different instinct. And he calls this instinct our educative instinct. Yet, as we shall see, we are still in the same territory, but Gray shifts the focus onto learning. And as we see, when we looked at Bregman, we kind of have this element of learning in there, where we're born to learn, to bond, and to play. So bonding and playing, we're all on board along the way with that. We had talked about that in many different ways, and we find it specifically in the Clown Manifesto, Nalle's book. And here now we're going to look at learning. Actually, there's a strong link between learning and playing, which makes me happy, because I do believe that I am, in my art and work and the craft of showmanship, I am a playful person, but I'm also addicted to learning. So let's follow the thinking of Peter Gray as we look at in one of the chapters that he, it's actually a sort of sub-chapter in his book, Free to Learn, and the chapter is called The Educable Animal. He sees us as an educable animal, an animal which can learn, and we've talked about that as well before. So Gray points out that we think of education as something which happens in school. I find this really interesting. It's like, education, learning, it's what happens in school. And he claims that this is because it's a peculiarity of the particular times that we live in. So with the rise of compulsory schooling, which has been the sort of last 200 years or so, we've come to think of education as something which is done to children by adults. But education long predates schooling, and even today, most education occurs outside of school. So that, without that last bit, think of education as something which is done to children by adults. This is a quote. And he says, but education long predates schooling, and even today, most education occurs outside of school. So that's an interesting claim. And Peter Gray argues that we're born with an instinct to educate ourselves. and that for tens of thousands of years this is what children have done. And he uses extensive examples from hunter-gatherer bands and from social science to show that learning takes place in spontaneous and powerful ways, which is but motivated by the children themselves. So the learning instinct affords children the ability to acquire the knowledge needed to be thriving and fully integrated members of their community. So this is very similar, as you might see, to the claims made by Ashley Montagu, where I've talked about, that's why he talks about these 27 behavioral needs or so to become thriving and fully integrated members of community. So what does this instinct look like his educable instinct to learn? So learning instinct, after we're looking at Montagu's 27 traits, Peter Gray's list in this educable animal subchapter is a lot more manageable, which is good, as he's pared it down to 3 umbrella terms. The term he uses for this kind of learning is cultural transmission. And here he focuses on this, on intergenerational passing on of the knowledge, as intergenerational, coming from parents to children, coming from adults to children, coming from men to boys and women to girls and men, and in every direction that you can think of within the community. But this learning happening by knowledge being passed from one generation to the next. And this knowledge, it's general knowledge in the way that we think of it, but it's also the rules and rituals and the stories of a tribe or a band or a village, and the stories and all these rules and rituals. Also, it's also the shared values and cultural beliefs of the whatever gathering of people it is. And this kind of learning is in a way reversed from our top-down schooling that we're used to. It's not so much the older generation choosing what's important and then passing on their wisdom and knowledge to the younglings. So even when I made a off-the-cuff a clarification or so about intergenerational passing of knowledge, I am so biased that I immediately start picturing that it's from the adults to the kids. But it turns out that in these societies that he talks about, it's rather how the younger generation takes on board what elements they deem useful, meaningful, and valuable. Because it's not set up in a school system where the adults get together and go, well, we have to teach them this one, and then we have to teach them this. I know for myself, when we're hanging out with people and it's whatever topics comes up in conversation, that's what we sort of dig into. Whatever it is that my daughter asks me, those becomes the things that we explore and that become part of her life. And the things she asks me or the thing that I ask of her are the things that we are interested in each other's worlds. So a lot of this is what a lot of the stuff that the kids then will find useful, meaningful, and valuable, and that prompts them asking or being interested. A lot of this is what they see and experience as as they see it, the genuine features of society, where it's at. If learning to build a camp or use a knife or mastering fire or learning how to track an animal is what's really going on in the society and what's of value, then the children will play with knives and fire. They will build small versions of their village nearby. And one of the interesting things for me as a parent is how in this hunter-gatherer band examples that he gives, there is just a whole other level of trust from the parents. I know I find it hard to let my daughter play unobserved with a knife. I see in this trust that Peter Gray describes in these societies, I see myself challenged, but with giving this much trust. So I see a reflection of the value that the adults in these societies places on the wisdom of childhood, that they will be okay and that learning will go on once they have this knife, and chances are they're not going to murder neither themselves nor anyone else. So anyway, these 3 drives which Peter Gray thinks affords learning are curiosity, playfulness, and sociability. So these things are what we've just spoken about in the previous episodes. And, it's not quite a coincidence that these line up as neatly as this, that I summarized the last 2 episodes and tried to get them into these 3 the headings. It is because I had read Montague and I thought it was very interesting, but that it is hard to get your head around 27 things. So then when I read Peter Gray, I thought, these 3 are wonderfully apt and specific. So as I chose to highlight certain aspects of Montague's list, I did that so that we would see this link when this came. And the interesting thing, an exciting thing for me, is how much there is overlap in all these books that I've been exploring. And in this case, it's the Bregman book, Humankind, Hopeful History, Free to Play, and Growing Young. They just are connecting together so deeply, and connecting together with my own feelings and thoughts about showmanship, which is why this whole season is happening. So reading this and finding the overlap in it all makes me feel like I'm standing on solid ground, not just the fringe ideas of some crazy adult who's somehow into playing. So let's continue to look at curiosity, play, and sociability. We come into the world curious. We've talked about this, but it guides us. This is what guides us towards exploration. We're curious about nature, about things, about how to do things, about animals, about people, about relationships, and anything else we might encounter or dream up. The inner experience of curiosity is like a magnet that draws us outwards. It's the default stance of a healthy child in the world. And I've been thinking that there's a relationship between boredom and curiosity. Like, boredom is a force that forces us towards curiosity. Or as soon as we get curious about something, then we aren't bored anymore. If you're really curious about something, you aren't actually bored. Whilst if you are bored, then you aren't curious. You're sort of sitting in one spot. So it's like boredom is the absence of curiosity and interest, and it's manifested as boredom. As a boredom is the manifest absence of curiosity. So curiosity, interest, love might be on a different spectrum to boredom. So if you're left to stew, then boredom becomes so uncomfortable that you have to get up on your feet and do something, anything. And as soon as you do, chances are something will trigger your curiosity and interest, and your brain will expand. We know that doing any kind of action in the world, anything that you do, whether it is climbing trees or running or playing the piano, literally changes your brain. We're always in this reflexive, interactive, reciprocal relationship with the environment. So if you just sit on the couch, then your brain will go towards that. And seeking the easy option of just scrolling, doom scrolling on that thing, will leave you stealing time, but not leave you fulfilled. So anyway, whatever we encounter as a result of our curiosity does not just meet us as a thing in itself. Whether it is a strangely shaped stick or a strange tool you find in the third drawer down, then we want to know what it is. But as children, this real purpose of things is not necessarily more important than whatever it can be in a game of their choosing. Anything that we encounter, or even any idea or fantasy that we have or dream up, we can immediately and deftly manipulate and tweak. We can tune it, we can combine it or juxtapose it with whatever else. Our propensity for seeking out patterns, it's whatever it's stimulated by, we can just go for it. And in other words, we can play with everything. Our deep playfulness allows us to disregard all kinds of restraints and reimagine and recombine in any which way anything we pleases, as whatever pleases us to combine. And when we play, we are free to completely disregard all natural constraints. Nothing is impossible in play. No thing is determined to be only one thing. Even when the passing on of knowledge from the adult is screaming that this little silver-colored trowel that we talked about for digging down strawberries, plants, that we say that, oh, it's a shovel and nothing else, whilst to the kid it is also a canoe and so much more. So when we are play, we are free. We're free to imagine and free to do in a way that we aren't when we're just focusing on whether it's a trowel. Because children are first and foremost doers. They run, they leap and balance on logs and lines along the side of the roads. They're always creating, and not just by pretending to be a high wire walker in their mind whilst walking on the curbside bricks, but they create things: sandcastles, stick animals, whole villages and secret bases on planks of wood inside the hedges and bushes surrounding the neighborhood properties. Anything can be combined with anything else to serve whatever purpose is relevant for the child. Even just for the pleasure to create something new, as ringing that bell for being an artist and being a novelty act, being a circus performer, looking for the new and crazy things that comes from the combination of things that seem to fit well together. So when we play, we are engaged in a kind of full spectrum thinking. That's what I talked about before. Like doing is a form of thinking. Like when you do something, you are stimulated, and it's a kind of thinking, because play is embodied. It's cognitive and emotional, and it's a self-developing exploration. By doing it, we are getting ideas and triggering thinking, and we're also growing emotionally as we are doing. So through play, children are not just working out what reality is, but they're also working out what reality could be. And the perfect way for a new generation growing up in a world where not everything that was important to the previous generation will be optimal for themselves. Is that just not a picture of every generation, where every previous generation will go, music is not like it used to be when I was growing up, then we were making music. Anyway, a major part of our curiosity and play concerns other people. As we've said, we are an ultra-social species that need and love to relate to others. If something has upset us, it can make us feel better just sharing our feelings with someone else. We don't just share feelings, we share any kind of information or skills and feel good in the process. We, for the most part, love to share information, like I'm doing right now. And we love to learn, which I'm doing by just trying to communicate this to you. I'm learning more about it. A lot of people that I speak to, Jay and whatever, it's like sometimes being put on the spot talking to someone. I hear him talking to students and me talking to people about all this stuff. I'm speaking it, and I'm realizing what it is that I think as I am speaking it. So learning by doing, even teaching or even talking, is a kind of doing which reciprocally then sets the world moving, and your internal world. So, but this information that we love to share, I don't just mean theoretical information or ideas, but also knowledge in the form of know-how, which is important in circus. Of course, humans want to share, and we are fine-tuned to be able to learn from each other. We want to learn skills, and we want to do what others do. We want to imitate what others are doing, and this feature is a trait that we share with other primates. But the will and ability to intentionally teach others how to best acquire a skill is, as far as I know and have found in my limited study, this seems to be an exclusively human trait. How to be able to intentionally teach others how to best acquire a skill. For a chimpanzee, it takes a very long time to master how to crack open nuts using a rock as a hammer. And in part, this is so because all they have to go by is watching their elders doing it. there are no finer points being transmitted, like the chimpanzee going, oh, you got to hold the rock like this. And I appreciate that they can't talk, but even just to show how to hold it, and you have to place the nut in this little depression of the log, or don't smash as hard as you can, and so forth. All those things which improves our own ability to transmit our knowledge from one generation to the next. We don't see that in chimpanzees. And I believe that is one of the reasons why, once we locked onto this, the sociability and the learning here, these are of course the topics that are the headlines of this, once we locked onto those, then accelerated learning just is a huge part of who we are. So another feature of curiosity and sociality is that we compulsively gossip. And we are interested in what others do more than any other species. Not every child likes playing competitive games, or the finite games, as James Cars calls them, but everyone, children and adults alike, are players in the infinite games. The infinite game of becoming a community member. Remember how James Cars said we have finite games, which are the games we play to win, and then there are the infinite games which we play to be able to continue playing. So every child are players in the infinite game of becoming a community member. This means that although we are free when we play, we willingly and happily modify ourselves to connect to others and to secure and deepen our relationship with these people. If a child, for some reason, may be fishing for an ice cream reward, once the planting of the strawberry plants, which was the example episode ago, once that's done, and then they want to sort of try to see if there's a chance they can get an ice cream, and they want then to relate to an adult, then they might, for the duration of that strawberry planting project, or by the end of it, by the time they realize, oh, they've almost planted all these strawberries. So now, then they might happily then succumb to this adult's limited perspective that a trowel is just a spade and no canoe. And even though they know that with their friends, the fact that it is a little spade might be completely irrelevant to whatever game it is that they're playing. So they might then take on your thing and go, oh yeah, well, now that we've used this shovel so much, maybe we can maybe we can have an ice cream, and they sort of adopt your point of view, and so that they'll go, oh, we're reasonable, we're connecting together here now, let me not talk to you about all these fantastic things, because I'm trying to relate to you, because then maybe I can get an ice cream. So but I was just thinking also this thing that to a child, saying that a spade is a spade is it seems just irrelevant. I mean, yeah, it's a spade, but moving on, let's what else could it be? This is where the excitement lies. And I remember that, and like, when I grew up, I didn't want to have my books just tell me how the world really was. I loved explorations and adventures, and I loved that aspect of it, and not just for things to be nailed down to what they were. And I can remember my wife also saying that in her childhood, that she remembers that, was like going, why would you ever watch something else than cartoons? Like, cartoons are much more fun, the way that they're portrayed, and rather than a real kind of feature film where they're just people, like, or whatever. Maybe that was a feature of growing up in the early 80s as well. But I see it in my daughter as well now. Like, she loves it as soon as there's something there where it's unpredictable and it's going in, and that's play. So telling a child that a spade is a spade, they're going like, yeah, it is, but this is irrelevant. And I was thinking that this is almost in a similar way to how it's irrelevant to tell a fan of American wrestling, like pro wrestling, that what happens in the square ring is a form of sports-themed theater, and that it isn't real. But the fan would just go, well, that's not the point. It's like you're just picking up the wrong thread in the conversation. And to be able to, get an ice cream and to be able to connect with other people, we sort of tune into each other. So, Yeah, we have so much to learn. We've talked about that before. We're born as the most unfinished species. We have to make ourselves, and hence the title of this here, Making Ourselves Through Play, was one of Peter Gray's lines of argument, which emerged already as the first sort of ethologists began to study animals in the play, like study animal play in the end of the 1800s. That is, an ethology is just the actual study of animals. In the end of the 1800s, when they started to look at play, they found that the kind of play that an animal gets into is directly related to the necessary skills and repertoires of behavior that any particular species need to survive and thrive. Like tiger cubs plays at sneaking, stalking, and pouncing, as well as play fighting with their siblings, whilst deer and other prey species, they engage in fleeing and dodging and running and these kinds of things. So another interesting aspect which emerges when studying play in different species is that there is a direct relation between how much an animal plays and the complexity of that animal's social structure. The larger the repertoire of behaviors needed to fit into a group and to manage themselves in life, the more they play. And there is so much, so this is where we come to us humans, there's so much that we humans have to learn. The complexity of human culture and life means that the amount of things that human infants need to learn is almost insurmountable. First, we need to learn to control our body and coordinate our limbs. We need to learn to sit, to eat, to stand up, and to walk, and so forth. And some behaviors, like learning to use our hands to grasp something or to put it in our mouth, is something any able-bodied infant learns. But more complex skills like walking and language, apparently, that doesn't really develop if an infant is deprived of human contact. They're skills that are socially learnt, or or as Peter Gray calls it, intergenerationally transmitted. These skills are so. So we know from cases of extreme neglect in children that it seems to be the case that if there are no humans walking around, a child that such a child will learn to crawl, but won't reliably advance to bipedal locomotion. I won't get the idea of walking. Unless there's other people around giving you the idea and preferably helping you, then crawling on all fours will remain a child's way of navigating the world, apparently. So kids raised by wolves, so to speak, will crawl rather than walk. I don't of course know if this is true, but this is what I've read, so I'm sharing it here. This is my story. So I'm deciding what to tell you. And the same is the case with language, that if no one around you speaks to you, then you don't begin to speak. One of the awful cases of where this was found is in the kind of systemic neglect that happened in Romanian orphanages in the 1980s. So many of those children never learned to speak, and in the most extreme cases where the deprivation lasted until they were 6 or 7 years old, these children kind of missed the ability to fully master language of any kind, like there's a sort of window. And I marvel at the fact that as infants, we do not only, this is just an aside, but it's like not only do we learn a language, we actually discover that language exists at all. We discover that certain sounds adults and other kids make around us signifies what the person thinks, feels, and what they did and when they were gone. We learn that a sound can be pointing to something beyond itself, and that this beyond is as rich in nuance and complexity as nature itself. When I imagine trying to learn my native language or grasp the fact that there is such a thing as language at all, and also then have to learn that in the way that I learned French and German in school, like it's just baffling that when I'm learning German in school, I can go, oh, well, that's the Norwegian equivalent of this. So when I was learning English in the beginning, where you go, oh, this word can be replaced by this and this concept or whatever. But if you don't have language at all, you have to like, that discovery is pretty huge. It's something that fascinates me, and just keep watching those YouTube videos for the people talking about theories and ideas surrounding the emergence of language. But anyway, as I do so, and imagine how difficult it was for me to try to learn German and French and English in school, I can easily imagine how learning one's first language is like practically impossible. So, on top of all the physical skills that we have to learn, there are just myriads of culturally specific customs and skills that we need to master. And for a culture by the sea, there is fishing and foraging at the seashore, and for a desert culture, it's how and where to find water and so forth. And the list of our shortcomings towards taking care of ourselves and how to function as organisms in the world and individuals within community is vastly complex. And the amazing thing is that we master all of these fundamental and vastly complex things as if it was child's play. Learning a language, like my daughter learning 2 languages, speaking them fluently without an accent, and it's like play. We didn't have to sit down and study. But then again, the fact that they actually master all these fundamental and enormously complex things, they're mastering it as if it is child's play, or perhaps we should actually say that the reason why they mastered it was that they did approach it as child's play. We are learning by playing, then we are learning as nature intended it. So, as we see here, Peter Gray and all these people and myself, we believe that the play has this learning aspect to it, and that serves as an important thing. Particularly, that might actually be how we learned before we started. That's the life education that we gave ourselves, guided by our own self-motivation and interest and whatever. So, and we adapt into the society and all of this stuff. Having our 27 behavioral needs, as Montague describes them, fulfilled, then we set ourselves up for a good life. But there are also consequences then. If this is true, that play affords you all these positive things, then the dark side of this is what happens when you don't get to play, when there is a deficit of play in your life. Because all healthy children does play. And through free play, kids learn to face their fears, how to make friends, and how to navigate friendships. Play is how a child learns to control themselves and, in general, control their lives, so they can take control of their lives. And so what happens if children doesn't play? And in the field of child psychology, a child who doesn't play is a big red flag, since a lack of interest in playing is a strong indication that something is not going as well as it should for that child. It's well known that the long-term effects of play deprivation, whether it comes from the child living in a stressful environment or from some internal struggle in the child, this does have negative consequences in the long term, such as depression, isolation, and reduced self-control. All these are commonly associated with play deprivation. The reason for this are many, but one aspect is that without actively engaging in play with other kids, the child misses out on important social and emotional learning. And it's through the inherent ups and downs and the triumphs and disappointments of kids interacting that important skills such as interpreting others' behaviors, as well as regulating one's own emotions, they all just are embedded in all this work. And it's through thousands of games, and I said work, but I mean like it's through all the play. It's through thousands of games that we learn the subtleties that tells us when someone is joking, when someone is saying something that's meant ironically, or when somebody steps over the line and one needs to stand up for oneself and others. And yet again, we might have this here as well with this window. You can, if you have a deprived childhood, deprived of play, you can get some of it back and you can still become a functioning human being, etc., all of that. But it's going to be difficult. And just like with language and these, if you don't acquire it naturally as a child, then it can be very hard to try to acquire these things as adults. It's like that hardwiring that happens when you're a child that sits so deep. You refer to it back and back. It's like something, it's like a firmware mistake in software or whatever. So as we mentioned, when a child misses out on, this is like it's like, so when a child misses out on certain steps in childhood development, they might struggle to ever truly catch up on those developments. So when the play experiences and the associated skills are acquired in childhood, they become integral parts of that individual's behavior. So children who don't play enough are quite likely to find it challenging to naturally regulate their emotions or to interact with others throughout their lifetime. Through play, the child of any species of mammal explores itself and its relations to others and their environment. And the scope of human consciousness and all the innumerable ways there is to be human that has manifested itself in thousands of cultures. And there are cultures related to nationality, because this is like it's a broad idea of culture here. Because some cultures are related to nationality, some to geography, some to vocations, as our showfolk or whatever. And there are cultures within cultures and subcultures emerging as responses, positive or contrary, to larger spheres of aspects in other cultures. There are very much more ways to be human than there is to be a mole. That's a bold statement, and I don't know what I will back that up. I haven't seen that in some scientific study, but maybe like the spade, a mole is a mole is a mole. Maybe not, but to some extent I think that's true. Because there's no way nature could biologically implant all the answers to all the solutions to the problem of how to be human. We have to think that what is buried in us that gives us that allows us to find these answers needs to be relatively simple. It can't be specific. Nature gives us a few things, like how a newborn baby girl completely of her own accord seeks out the nipple and begins to drink. This is important. I don't know if that's the best example, but nature can't give us the answers because there are too many answers to be given. So it has to give us a method to find the answers. And with Peter Gray, I believe this method is play, which is helped along by curiosity. The way we are to learn about the world, that drive that makes us get all the answers, is through play, which is kind of fueled by the curiosity or so, this drive. And curiosity then is, as we said, it's an aspect of that's how we see see us as Homo ludens, the thing that makes us the playing being. And this impulse to solve the human problem is particularly alive in the young, as they remake what biology and culture and environment has given them in ways that they seem possible and fit for them. So this impulse to just, like you would expect, who is it that has the most strongest need to learn about the world and themselves, to be able to survive as soon as they can? Well, it's the young of any species, and these are reliably the ones that play the most. So play can reorganize the components of anything, and it's a way to crack open the multifarious nature of existence. And when approaching any given task playfully, more possibilities will emerge, which opens up the possibilities for novelty and innovation. So just in that last sentence, that if we approach the world more playfully, then more possibilities will emerge, which opens up possibilities for novelty and innovation. And novelty and innovation lies at the heart of what it is to be a performer working within the field of circus and magic and all that. We are looking for novelty. We're looking for innovations and ways to present that to other human beings so that they will be thrilled and excited by it. So here we have that little metaphorical bell again. Ding, 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 ding. We are talking about play and the instinct of that, but we are kind of also always talking about showmanship. So I might have briefly mentioned the idea of the colonization of childhood earlier, but now we're going to dig into this a little bit more. So some pedagogues, teachers or whatever, they grasp the value and usefulness of play, yet they might confuse it with a tool that they can harness to make kids learn whatever is written down in any given curriculum. So in the process, they are completely missing the fact that play needs to be self-motivated. And we know that from our list of criteria. That's criteria 3. Play has to be self-motivated. So it can only be play if it's done voluntarily. Because all too often, adults like this think that they can harness play or improve on it. Like free play. Just letting the kids manage their own time and trust that it has value in and of itself doesn't strike us as a particularly good idea. We just don't quite know if we can trust that. We might think that play might be useful, but only as a tool to learn whatever nation or institution deems important, not whatever it is kids do, which almost per definition is a waste of time. Any adult who's gone through their nation's schooling system will know in their bones that, of course, free play isn't the way to learn. Adults know that learning is what we do inside the classrooms in schools, and free, unguided, unstructured play is what happens outside in the playground and the schoolyard. And it's unstructured and it's purposeless, and great effort is being made so that the kind of frivolous and fun play is kept well away from the serious knowledge acquisition which happens inside the classroom. Inside the school, we get learning presented in serious and cultivated ways where humankind has improved and ordered learning into an efficient and standardized system, which will be much better than any disorderly process outside in the playground, or in the forest, or in the fields. This is kind of implicit if it's not outright spoken, but is this actually correct? That is that's a question that doesn't need to be answered. I think you already know that, because I think that play is learning, but not in this kind of left brain fashion, to use Ian McGilchrist's terminology. It's not something that's done as a tool. You're not doing it for something beyond itself. And this is, we get to play criteria 2 here, for those who can remember that, what has about it. It's apparently purposeless, but it's actually, so it's done for its own sake. Play is always done for its own sake. So play is learning, and when you do play for its own sake, then play is learning as nature intended, if you allow me that phrase. I used it before, but it's... I like to say that, so I'm going to say it. Play is learning as nature intended it to be. Play teaches us all the stuff that's not facts and figures, and that's taught in schools to score well on standardized tests. All that other stuff, that's what play teaches us. And through play, we learn to take turns, we learn fairness, we learn to compromise and to stand up for ourselves. And when a good game is happening, each player must carefully navigate the feelings of others, or they risk that the game falls apart. We've spoken about that already. And if one of the players bosses the others around, chances are that the others lose interest in the game, which brings the game to an end. And as it turns out, having empathy and being able to understand the point of view of others, as well as cooperating in creative and improvisational explorations of character and situations, this is exactly the activities that one also needs to engage in to master social life. And the fact that the play also is the most fun thing that a child can do, that means that they never tire of it. This is criteria 1. Because it's fun and exactly what they want to do, they play and they play and they play. And that's what we do when we're trying to cram. You're saying the words over and over again, and you're doing it but it doesn't always come from self-motivation. So the children can repeat an activity or play out all endless variations of a scenario. And they only think of it as, as playing or doing stuff. But along the way, they are learning. They're learning so much. So they're going through the behavior, which is similar to the kind of learning that we think of that we do in schools, where you try to learn a curriculum, where you try to master a skill in whatever. When you go to a Waldorf school or a Steiner school anyway, that you're doing woodworking, or you're hammering copper and shaping it into things, or you're making shoes, or you're sewing a shirt, all those things as well. They also, you are learning, but there are still things that are on the curriculum. So it's the ways that you learn things is by doing it over and over and over again. But when it's motivated through play, then it never feels like you are working, So this kind of learning, play learning, this permeates children's whole existence, which means that through play, they experience life as fun. Criteria 1. So although each individual game might seem purposeless, and each play session might seem disjointed, just wildly jumping from idea to idea, there is always a deeper and arguably more important learning going on. They are learning and mastering how to become happy and enthusiastic human beings. No matter how random and useless we might see the games of children playing with dolls, Star Wars figurines, or matchbox cars, or sticks and stones in nature, when researchers have observed the free play of children without adult interference over time, it turns out that just like the cat and weasel plays in ways that benefits them as adults, mature parts of members of their species, then human children also ends up playing and learning skills that are supremely useful and important to the culture that they're immersed in. We mentioned that before about hunter-gatherer bands of where children play with knives and fire, etc. So the further goals are reached without ever having been aimed at. This is like play is done for itself, and it is apparently purposeless, but it has benefits for the future anyway. So through play, you master the future goals by just having the best time doing what you want. You're mastering your future goals, and you haven't even set yourself those goals yet. So that play is of utmost importance to children is not necessarily a commonly held belief, certainly not something that people talk much about. And perhaps this is because the majority, I don't know, but I hold this belief, and perhaps it is because of the majority of my schooling happened in a Waldorf Steiner school where play is taken very seriously, or perhaps it is because my mother was a kindergarten teacher in the same Steiner system, and she is a firm believer in the inherent value of play. But I've always taken it for given that playing is seriously valuable. It's a topic that I've spoken about directly as a performer. Towards the end of my 2006 solo show called The Adventures of Captain Frodo, I proclaimed, "I am a fully grown child and I play for a living." Yet the full scope of play's importance is still only dawning on me. And my obsession with this and myself as a fully grown child that plays for a living, that is in part what this whole year worth of podcasts will be about. So with all this talk about learning through play, I'm not saying that I think we should abolish schools and the kind of learning that goes on there. But I am questioning how much time is spent learning facts to be produced on tests at some point. It is a legitimate question to wonder about the value of knowing the names of all the kings Norway has had by heart when you're in 5th grade, or knowing the capitals of the American states, or the year of important battles in the Napoleonic Wars, when all this can immediately be found by asking your smartphone. Google and the access to all the information in the world has democratized knowledge in ways unimaginable when I began school in the early 80s. You can, and I do, practically daily watch university lectures from the world's top university for free on YouTube. I've followed several university-level courses through all of their 20 or so lectures, and then when I lived in Las Vegas, I even bought the school book course guide to a course that I was following on YouTube. I didn't get a paper saying that I'd completed the Yale course or judging me on how well I had grasped the material presented, but I loved the process, and a lot of the detailed knowledge that I have that you might have picked up along the way listening to me about evolution and ecology comes from that course and reading that book alongside it. I had fun, so perhaps that's a sign that I played myself through the material. So as human beings living in the 21st century, we associate or indeed equate learning with what happens in school. Knowledge is something a teacher gives us, or gives you, or in many cases sells to you. And education is something that you get from someone else. So it's worthwhile examining this idea and putting a question mark to it. As mentioned, school as we know it is actually quite a new phenomenon, certainly in terms of our deep evolutionary history. Compulsory schooling of the kind that we have today is actually only about 200 years old, and the curriculum grows practically every year, whilst we human beings have been learning and finding our ways in the world for 200,000 to 300,000 years. So genes and biology does not give us ready-made answers hardwired to solve difficulties of becoming and staying human. Instead of giving us answers, which, as all answers, can be right or wrong or useful or useless, and that might change, even just the same fact might change as whatever, nature has given us a process to acquire answers. Evolution gave us a method or an approach to generate answers, not individual answers, but to generate more answers to whatever questions we have. And yeah, I had this thought that I should talk about what Eva Heckscher had to say about that he goes into the class and he goes, okay, next class that I'm going to do, if you don't have questions, there will be no class, because knowledge can only, and I see that as it can only happen, learning can only happen if it's actually directly related to you. So if it starts from the questions of the students or starts from your own personal questions, then learning happens immediately. But anyway, the method that evolution gave us, that is an approach to generate answers, and not individual answers, but to continually generate answers. This is the process of play. And perhaps schools need a similar solution. As technology advances and artificial intelligence will write our children's assignments for them, maybe we don't need to know so many answers, which we aren't asking questions for. Maybe there's something deeper that we need, a way to be in the world. And maybe what we need is to find a passion for life, for being curious about the world, ourselves, and our place in it. Through inner motivation, we find what the world is and can be, while simultaneously it's being revealed to us through this inner motivation, through the play, where our passion lies. And in our day and age, finding what we love, finding something that we're thoroughly and truly deeply enthusiastic about, it will solve many of our time's most prevalent problems. Knowing what you want will guide you well on the way towards finding your meaning in life. So you can play yourself towards more meaning in life, and you can play yourself to knowing better who you are. Yep, play, here we go. I think today I had this feeling like I was making it connect more to showmanship than I have in a while. And I hope you're finding this valuable, and that you keep seeing that actually as we are talking about play, we are always also talking about showmanship. And this goes back to what we talked about as this method in earlier on, and like how do you read it. And I hope that you listen to what I have to say about these things with it in mind, that I'm talking directly to you about your life, your specific things that you're doing today, and that you have been doing, and the project that you're working on for your next show. That will allow you to make me think that whenever I'm being a little vague or whatever, like the details that I'm talking about is your specific life. That's how I read things, and I hope that you're taking it in this way too. And I'm going to end by asking you to tell a friend about this. Tell someone you think anyone. Tell a friend that this podcast is awesome. Say that I told you to tell them that to two of your friends. That would be really good for me. And with that said, all that's left to be said is take care of yourself and those you love, and I hope to see you along the way.